Week 5 is almost in the books, but before we look ahead to our Week 6 waivers, let's celebrate us some
Fantasy Heroes.
AJ had a barnstormer of a game, ending up tight end 1 on the week, and he's looking like a real tight end option moving forwards.
His name is Rico, and he likes to score touchdowns. Dowdle didn't dawdle as he clocked up 200 plus yards and 32.4 fantasy points.
Seattle couldn't keep Tampa at bay, and the Mecca Egbuka tore them apart with 163 yards and a touchdown as his stellar season continues.
CJ Stroud pleased the crowd as he put up his first 25 plus fantasy point game in nearly 2 years, but look like they'll be mighty evermore.
Jamar Chase is back, and he proved he is still the number 1 in Cincinnati. 110 yards and 2 touchdowns in week 5. Does this mean the fantasy panic is over?
You didn't draft JT? Then cry me a river. Taylor continues to dominate, and with 3 touchdowns against Vegas, he's in league-winning form for the dominant Indianapolis Colts. Did you like that a sang for you, Edward?
Lovely stuff.
Let's move on then to our favourite part of the week, and that is some rhymes and puns for our Fantasy Zeros.
Fantasy Zeros.
Does one down week mean James might finally be cooking up that touchdown regression everyone was promising, or was it just a bad day in the kitchen?
A reception for 9 yards against the Bengals? You must be joking, Jameson.
If you drafted Jerry Jeudy, then you must be very moody, and he should be saying howdy doody to get him benched or even dropped.
The Saints were heavenly, but Javon Johnson was more devilish as he failed to inspire for the 2nd week in a row.
Just 2 receptions for Mark Andrews, but don't be in a rush to drop him. Surely he just needs Lamar back, baby!
A banged-up Bucs offense should have been easy prey for a top 3 defense. Nope. -3 points for the Seahawks defense.
Nailed it.
Nailed it again.
Before we move on to the main part of our show, that if you'd like to see some heroes and zeros every week with some lovely rhymes and puns, please do take a moment to subscribe, like, and give us a share. Review preview shows each week and start sits, waivers, all the good stuff. Ed, this week, though, let's have a look at our first game of the week. And I've gone for a team we've spoken about a few times so far, and one we've barely mentioned. As I look at, the absolute hammering that the Colts gave the Raiders in week 5, 40-6. I've started off from thinking that actually pre-season, both teams felt the same. We were fearful for what the season could look like for both of them, but both had players who individually could help turn their fortunes round. More so for the Raiders, I think. But the Colts are now 4-1. The Raiders are 1-4. And this gave us loads to look at for fantasy, starting with the QBs. Another quiet game for Geno Smith. He's not the future for Vegas. I think we now know that quite comfortably. I don't think he ever was the future. He was the present and a very short present. It was just an idea of 1 or 2 seasons, I guess, really. To be fair, though, we never saw him as a kind of a top fantasy asset. And his 1 top 12 games came against Washington, which seemed likely makes sense. 6 touchdowns and 9 interceptions is very concerning, though. Do you know the last quarterback to clock up 9 interceptions in the first 5 games of the season, Ed?
Are you going to say Joe Burrow?
No, not that kind.
Remember, he had a bad start to a season and maybe didn't throw that many interceptions. No, go on.
Zach Wilson.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But Danny Dimes wasn't fancy relevant in much of a meaningful way and tagged in Richardson to finish the game, which is a huge indicator of just how good this Colts offense has been. Jonathan Taylor, his 2nd game with 3 rushing touchdowns, yet another game with 17 plus rushing attempts, and his use in the passing games. He worked his way to 31.60 points and RB2 on the week so far. He's back to his best and even got himself an octopus.
Love an octopus.
But by necessity, because the name is completely... I've got Schrader in my head, if I've got that right. The Colts kicker was out as well. Surely someone else on an NFL team can at least have a pop at a point after. Surely.
Well, he says, yeah, surely someone can swing their leg. It can't be that difficult. Sorry, kickers, that was really offensive.
Ashton Genty was steady again this week, 109 total yards, ended with 15.90 fantasy points. He is as advertised, but the Raiders need to be better for us to see his best. I wonder whether we're destined to see all this potential from Genty in lots of kind of big games, and then it's not until he moves that we see that, a la Saquon Barkley moving to the Eagles. Maybe that's unkind to the Raiders and they'll get it sorted out, but it feels like his production is a Raiders issue, not a Genty issue for me. Wide receivers, Trey Tucker was flex-worthy this week, as Besh Myers did very little with their 6 targets each as well. For the Colts, you spoke about Michael Pittman from a DFS point of view. He continues to be good, but not spectacular, and that's fine, because you'll have drafted him somewhere, you're happy with him in your flex spot. Another 5 receptions, another touchdown on his way to 14.90 points. If we'd been saying pre-season, draft Michael Pittman, he'll be a fine flex play each week, we'd have ridiculed ourselves for saying that, but that's exactly what he is at this stage. No Bowers hurt Vegas. No Meyer to deputise left. Albert I've got my names out. Albert Ogwebunam.
It out for not.
I'd even written it out for myself. Yeah, Albert Ogwebunam to fill in as best he could, but 8.6 reasonable, but completely useless because he's rostered in 0% of leagues. And Tyler Warren continues the trend of rookie tight ends having immediate fantasy impact over the last 3 years. This week's tight end 10 currently making 4 top 12 finishes in 5 games so far. Is very useful weapon, isn't it? And it looks like he's going to have an amazing career ahead of him. Not a competitive game, Ed. I'll take that. But from a fantasy perspective, quite interesting nonetheless.
Indeed, JT, it's exciting to see what he's going to put up this year. He, without doubt, is back to his absolute best. And I mean, the Colts, I'll be honest, are nothing short of a phenomenon this year. Nobody, I saw a few people being slightly higher on them than others, but nobody is going to claim to me they thought they were going to be this good. Nobody.
If someone had drafted Jonathan Taylor middle of the first round, it would have been laughed at in drafts. For redraft season, wouldn't it? And actually, that would have been a value, as we'll find out when we look at some first round ADP in a little while. Your game, though, Ed, you went for the game, really, really got going, didn't it?
Indeed, and if yours was a non-contest, mine was very much the opposite and became a great contest in the final quarter. They looked very dull early on as the Dolphins eased to an early lead. I think they were 17-0 up at one stage. Got very exciting in the final quarter, and the Panthers snuck home. And there's definitely a few interesting fantasy storylines emerging for both sides. I have to start by looking at the quarterbacks, and as I predicted, it was a week to start Tua. Very solid week against a subpar defense. So, I mean, at one stage, it looked like he was going to have a mega week, but it very much tailed off for him later on. And that final drive was particularly galling for Tua fans. His highest fantasy score since week 14 of last season. He's cutting out the errors. In the last 4 weeks, he's had 9 passing touchdowns and 0 interceptions. So that's positive. But he's got the Chargers and the Browns in the next 2 games. So don't get too carried away. I don't think he's someone who should be starting with regularity. It was a great win for the Panthers, but Bryce Young continues to be a fantasy insignificance. 1 fantasy relevant week out of 5 is basically what you'd have expected from him. And there's no real sign that that's going to improve going forward. Somebody to avoid. Miami's run game was non-existent. How many rushing yards across the whole team, Mark?
I'm going to pretend I'm not looking at your notes. Say a low number that sounds okay. I reckon 50, Ed. It can't be lower than that, can it?
Oh, no, who'd have thought? No, 19 rushing yards.
Well, I am surprised.
I mean, Achane, as he normally does, boosted his numbers with some receiving work. He's done that for most of the season. He's been very steady. RB11, RB3, RB12, RB17, and RB13 as we stand this week. Rico Dowdle had one of those games where everything he touched turned to gold. The Dolphins' porous rush defense helped a lot. Talk more about Rico Dowdle in waivers later. Trevor Etienne had his best week so far, 3.9 fantasy points.
Ooh.
So, yeah, a big one. I think his worst week
Travis
was minus.
numbers.
Yeah, they are Travis numbers indeed. Yeah, I think his worst week was minus 0.2. So 3.9 is amazing. On to receivers. Now, we talked about Waddle quite a lot pre-season. We were asking that question. Is he now a fantasy relevance? Not if this week is anything to go by. And to be fair, to sit as wide receiver 18 after 5 weeks is much better than I expected. With Hill out for the season, he's probably someone you're looking to start every game at the moment, as he's going to be targeted most by Tua. If we look at Panthers receivers, Ted McMillan, the rookie, another solid week, and seems to be Bryce Young's top target, but still waiting for his first touchdown. He sits at wide receiver 25, and he was drafted as wide receiver 27, and will probably finish in about that ballpark. First fantasy relevant performance of the year. Go on.
Oh no, I was just still kind of thinking about Waller and the fact that, say, he got to that in 2 games. That we said one of the things we spoke was that time off actually has that got him right because of all the injuries, and he's come back in, and I didn't think he'd be as fancy relevant as whatsoever, even after that big first week.
No, I mean, yeah, another stellar week. I mean, 5 of 5, 78 yards, touchdown. You can't ask for more than that. And again, we'll talk about him more in waivers later because his roster percentage is going to shoot up. Maybe the Dolphins have done it right. They've taken that time, and now he looks like, a real threat and somebody for Tua to rely on. Xavier Legette, first fantasy relevant performance of the year, and he'll continue to be sporadic at best, as Bryce Young continues to be sporadic at best. And finally, nothing from a tight end perspective for the Panthers because Jatavian Sanders was injured. There was 1 reception apiece for Mitchell Evans, James Mitchell, and Tommy Tremble. I just wanted to mention them because I don't expect to mention them again this season.
We will mention Mitchell Evans on the main show when we do our fantasy props. I'm very cross with him for scoring, but tune in to see why he will be relevant there. Bryce Young was interesting because there were a couple of plays from Bryce Young that you thought, here we go. This is the Bryce Young we were promised kind of pre-draft, and it's just not happening consistently, is it? He's so up and down, and I think he'll be a player
fantasy perspective. Yeah, I mean, the win will do him wonders, and I'm not disputing the fact that he's possibly looking better in real life. But fantasy, there's just not the volume or production there that's going to really make him, even in 2 QB leagues, he's going to be struggling, to get in teams.
Before we move on to our next bit, then, once again, please do subscribe, like, and give us a share. We are going to have a look at now, Ed, kind of that little feature of this week's show, Redraft ADP Value Check. So, the reason we have a look at that ADP value check is because we want to see how that top 12 are kind of shaping up in the season. Because look, we always think in the off season there are certain things that are absolute guarantees and it can't possibly go wrong. And then every year the guarantees are not guarantees and we are surprised. So let's have a look at how it's going this year. But first, this has been a bugbear of yours for a little while. So lots of people talk about and track the Madden cover curse, but you like to track the Fantasy 101 curse here at TH Fantasy Football. And you said pre-season that as soon as it was Saquon for a bit, then it was Jamar Chase that took over that mantle, which made you very sad because that meant you felt you were certain it was all going to go down the pan for Jamar Chase.
I blame that curse entirely for Joe Burrow's injury.
Well, let's see how relevant the curse actually is then. So I've gone back to 2021. So we're looking at the last 5 seasons, including this season. 2021, CMC was the 101, finished RB 38 after playing only 7 games. 2022, Jonathan Taylor was the 101. After a stellar first season, he finished RB 38, playing 11 games and averaging 13.3 points per game across that window. 2023, Justin Jefferson finished as wide receiver 33 and playing 10 games, but was averaging 20.2 points per game either side of his injury. So he came as advertised. It was an unfortunate injury. Then last year, CMC again. He was RB 68, only featured in 4 games, with only 2 being fantasy relevant. And everyone spent the offseason being very, very cross that he had ruined it for them and they would never draft him ever again. 2025 then, Ed. Let's work our way through the top 12 picks. Jamar Chase, currently Wide receiver 9, 17.1 fantasy points per game. Right, let's be clear. The 5 games means that the average can lack little integrity when it comes to a data point, because Jamar Chase has had a couple of big weeks, a couple of shockers in there so far. So that average points per game isn't really that meaningful for some of these players. Hugely impacted by Burrow being out. His week 2 performance looked really promising of signs of things to come from the pair again this year. And I think it will be up and down from here on in for Chase. He's never going to be in the benching conversation. A lot of wide receivers, after getting your 7-point weeks, you will be thinking about benching them, but you just never can tell with Jamar Chase. And this week, he absolutely smashed it again and gave you hope for the future once more. I just think the concern is that over the course of the last year, he averaged 13.4 yards per target with Burrow. Weeks 3 and 4, he averaged 7.3 yards per target with Browning. And even this week, when he was back up to form, that was 11 yards per target. It's going to be inconsistent, but you're never going to bench him, are you?
No, quite simply, no. He won't have as many big weeks. And I think even under Burrow, you'd always be guaranteed maybe 15 points. But I think he's going to have more dud weeks under Browning where he's under 10 points. But you just can't risk leaving someone like Chase on your bench.
Saquon Barkley went off number 2, currently the RB9 with 16.1 fantasy points per game so far. Regression of sorts felt obvious after such a big 2024. But currently sitting at that RB9 isn't where we maybe expected that to be. Currently 3.25 yards per carry after averaging 5.81 across 2024. But he's got a good run of games coming up that are quite friendly to running back. So hopefully that will offset the disappointment so far. Only 6 carries this week was an anomaly, but a receiving touchdown salvaged things for him for fantasy. He was a player that I think I was much happier drafting around 3, 4, 5. So I didn't have to make the decision of not taking Saquon, because I think we've talked ourselves into the fact that it doesn't repeat the curse of the first player. I think we were quite happy not to make that decision. And that's kind of paid off, really, when you then look at Bijan. So went off as third player off the board, currently RB7, 21.9 points per game. And that includes his bye week. So he's down at RB7, but he's played a game fewer than the other running backs ahead of him. He's the first player you can be happy with on this list, really. Steady continued in the pass game is exactly what we're hoping for this season. 11.74 yards per carry is per target, is very pleasing too. Only 1 rushing touchdown so far, but it's early in the season. He's the sort of player that has a couple of 3 touchdown games in him, a la what we've seen from Jonathan Taylor as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, currently RB4, 19.1 fantasy points per game. He's been consistent so far, hasn't dropped below 15 fantasy points in a game yet. 4 rushing touchdowns and 1 receiving touchdown. Absolutely nothing to worry about. Although I would have bet my house on him getting 2 touchdowns on the ground or through the air against the Bengals. It just didn't happen. I expect to be a top 10 fantasy player in overall when the season is done. And yeah, I'm not worried about him at all at a point where I think maybe we expected bigger things out of the gate, but Monty is still relevant. I just think we saw in that game, I think was it last week, where Monty went off the boil and Gibbs still got it done. He just does get it done week in, week out, and he seems fairly safe. Next up, though, Ed, over to you for Justin Jefferson.
Yes, I mean, he went off the board as 105. I'd say he's been steady, if unspectacular, this season. He's not had a dud week, but also yet to really go off. His highest weekly score was 22.6 points. Now, clearly, the QB situation in Minnesota is an issue. You've got JJ McCarthy's lingering injury. That's not helped. And Carson Wentz is not who we want throwing in the ball, in an ideal world. 11 targets and 100-plus yards in the last couple of weeks. In both weeks is much more promising. But he's only had 1 touchdown all season. That was back in week 1, so that is not as promising. There's a bye for the Vikings this week, so you'd hope McCarthy would be back after that bye. But the Vikings have got a tough run of games defensively. Eagles, Chargers, Broncos, all strong defenses. Look, JJ's going to comfortably be a top 10 wide receiver, but that isn't what you drafted. You drafted him to be a top 3 wide receiver. And I'm not sure I've got huge confidence in him being top 3 to 5 at the moment, which is what you'd want. I mean, what do you think I'm being a bit harsh? Do you think he will come good, or is that quarterback situation, which we were a bit nervous about, coming to fruition?
I suppose we're a bit in the same position as last year. We've not seen enough of JJ McCarthy, have we? Like, the injury is awful time for him to kind of get into a rhythm and prove himself over the course of the season. But yeah, you're right. We don't want Wentz throwing the ball. Jefferson is the sort of player that, similar to several of these, you draft them this high because they've got the big beat weeks in them. So he could end up there or thereabouts, but it might not feel like that on a week by week basis. Does that make sense?
No, definitely. I think that's a good way to describe it. And I mean, I suppose CD Lamb at the 106 is in a similar position. He's currently a wide receiver 42, averaging 12.7 points per game, but it's difficult to judge him due to this ongoing high ankle sprain. He's missed 3 games, looks like to miss at least another game or 2. Was very, very solid in his first 2 games of the season, averaging 8 receptions and 100 yards a game despite no touchdowns. Pickens and Ferguson have been the big beneficiaries, but I have little doubt that Lamb is the top target for Dak when he returns in that high-powered offense. Moving on to Amon-Ra, quiet week 1, but after that he's been absolutely relentless and only sits behind Puka. The Lions' offense have clicked into top gear, and he's going to be the main beneficiary of that. Currently wide receiver 2, averaging 23.6 points per game. He's almost guaranteed 7 to 8 receptions, 1,700 yards, and a touchdown every week. Plus, he's going to have wide receiver 1 weeks, like his 3 touchdown week 2 performance against the Bears. And I'd say he's probably nailed on as a top 3 receiver, barring injury. And then it's that time, Sir Mark, to talk about your whole lot of beef, Derrick Henry. I don't think we expected him to be RB22 with 12.5 points per game. I'm not really sure how we explain what's happened to Derrick Henry. He went off as RB1 in week 1. We thought, here we go, back to business. But between weeks 2 to 4, he averaged 10 carries a game. And if you had shares in him, I mean, you're probably going to be worried. Add into the mix Lamar Jackson's injury, amongst many injuries for the Ravens, which are impacting on Henry. You'd be forgiven for pressing the panic button. He averaged just 2.2 yards per carry against the Texans, which is a concern for Derrick Henry and his managers.
Yeah, the O-line's in an absolute mess. And I'm not one to blame injuries, but I think there was the stat about 160 million of the Ravens cap was on the sidelines yesterday.
Wow.
And that has a huge, huge impact. But I think it looks a bit of a confidence thing with Derrick Henry, which it isn't what you've ever seen from Derrick Henry before. And like we said, after the first fumble, expected him to not fumble again and run over the next player. And then we kind of had that again. You expect he could have one big game and go on, but we've said that a couple of weeks now. So when's that coming, I guess, is the worry, isn't it?
Yeah, and like you say, Ravens obviously are in a difficult spot with injuries, and that I'm sure you don't need to tell you that was a horrible defeat against the Texans, and it doesn't bode well for the next few weeks.
All right, I didn't mind it. Before we move on, then, say tell me to subscribe, like, and share before we start to discuss CMC. Do you remember, Ed, when all that panic pre-season when we heard about the calf injury, all the people refusing to draft him? I can remember taking him 5th overall in a redraft league, and people say, "Oh, that's an overspend. What are you worried about this?" And kind of genuinely find it laughable you take him there. And we always felt quite confident with that because when he's on the field, he is an absolute monster, and that is what we've seen from now. So this player I've got loads of shares in redraft because if I'd picked 4 or later, he was probably my auto pick at that point. And I just think that it's highly likely that he just gets better for fantasy as season progresses because he's not got a single rushing touchdown yet. Yes, he's got 3 receiving touchdowns. What if they start coming? He's just going to be putting up monstrous numbers, and he's currently the RB1 overall as well, averaging 56 rushing yards per game, 77 receiving yards as he offsets some of the injury strain for the 49ers as well. is more than page back wherever you took him in redraft those first 5 games. And he is, for me, at the minute, one of the absolute bargains of round 1. I say not closely followed by, superseded by Puka Nacua, who was averaging going at the 110. Current wide receiver 1, 26.8 fantasy points per game. Points. That's what you get with Puka. A low, an absolute shocking low in week 3 of a mere 22.8 points. And he's only averaging 10 receptions per game. He's just an absolute phenomenon. I think in my history of playing fantasy football, he is the greatest dynasty value pick I can think of, considering his 2023 rookie ADP of wide receiver 15, going undrafted in a lot of rookie drafts. It's just been phenomenal value so far. If you were drafting around the 9-10 point, there is every chance you ended up with, or had at least the choice of, Puka Nacua, and then in round 2, going QB early and Josh Allen. If you did that, you're absolutely laughing. It is the absolute golden window of the draft so far. Obviously, that can change throughout the season. But yeah, you're on a fast track to the playoffs at present if you went for that. And you probably thought you might be with the following player as well up until last week.
Yeah, if Puka Nacua is happy times, Malik Neighbours is definitely the opposite. Sad times, more for him than for fantasy managers. Obviously done for the season following that horrible ACL injury. He promised so much after that mega week 2 against the Cowboys. It would have been nice to see how he might have fared with Jackson Dart. But we just have to kind of hope that he comes back fit and firing. And finally, if we look at the 112 in redraft leagues, and that was the rookie superstar, Ashton Genty, currently RB14 with 15 points per game. Let's be honest, for us, Genty was always going far too high in redraft.
Yeah.
He's going to be a fancy beast, but he was entering an uncertain situation in Vegas with a below average quarterback and just a not very good team around him. So there were always question marks. He had a very quiet week, weeks 1 to 3, and that would have prompted worries. But the last 2 weeks seem to have showcased the talent that he's got. RB1 last week with those 3 total touchdowns and over 250 yards from scrimmage across the last 2 weeks. That suggests that there's, real potential there. And he's had a bit of an uptick in receiving work, which is interesting. 5 of 7 for 42 yards this week, maybe benefiting from the absence of Brock Bowers. I think he's going to comfortably be a top 10 running back this season as he learns his trade. But, you're not going to get the fireworks of week 4 every week. And yeah, as we said at the start of season, he was being overdrafted. That's just coming to fruition, really.
So that is our rundown of redraft ADP value. Next week, our mini feature is going to be having a look at rookies and how all the rookies from this year's draft are faring. So join us again for that. But Ed, finally, to finish us up looking at this week before we look ahead to week 6, just a couple of little fancy talking points from week 5. Matt Stafford just wanted to mention, first time with back-to-back 20-plus fantasy point games since week 14 in 2023. Waiver wire option this week as well, available in 39% of leagues, and has Baltimore and Jacksonville over the next couple of weeks. So you got him as a plug-and-play QB, as like a beat the waiver wire sort of option to get your bids in early last week. That could really pay off. Kyren Williams, another solid week, 65 yards rushing, 67 yards receiving, 2 touchdowns. No sign of Corum or Hunter offering any threat to his workload yet. Oh, and that was probably our biggest question mark about him coming into the year, wasn't it?
Yeah, he's somebody that I've always had a question mark over, Kyren Williams, maybe unfairly, but he's been dominant in that running back room.
It looked yesterday like Harold Fanning was about to have another monster week when he got his 4 receptions and touchdown in early. And then he had a little rest for the rest of the game, letting Njoku step in. Either they could both have fancy relevance each week, or they might. I don't know. I really don't. I think at the minute, if I had to take the gamble each week, I think Njoku might be the safer gamble. My reason for that is Fanning's 4 receptions yesterday for 13 yards, Njoku 6 for 67. would suggest that Njoku might be the safer gamble. I think, unfortunately, rather than having 2 tight end options, we just have none that you're happy with each week at the Browns and just make tight end even more tricky, which we all absolutely love.
I think the problem with the Browns is that receiver-wise, there's not much happening. We mentioned Judy, I think, for the second time in zeros.
Yeah.
So Fannin and Njoku might well both get the work going forward.
More tight end misery. I dropped Engram to my bench everywhere and to waivers in a few places this week. Fortunately, as he scored 13.3 points, currently tight end 11. Where I dropped him, I'd managed to pick up Waller, who returned with 18.8 points. So that worked out in the long run. But I knew, well, we said, didn't we? If I drop Engram, it'll have that week. He did. So there we go. You're welcome if you stuck with him. You were right, Ed. We've already said about Tua being a start and not a sit. So we both went the other side of it this time, and that's what we got. And then finally, I just want to mention Jackson Dart. He gave us a showcase of what it's like to watch a high-risk rookie quarterback this week. Great link up with Johnson twice early, couple of great improvised rushes, and then 2 interceptions later in the game with some extremely questionable decision-making. Far too soon to judge him, though. I think from all I took away from that is that over the next couple of weeks, where he's got some tough matchups, absolutely I'm not starting him anywhere. We've seen signs, though, that we could have an exciting fancy asset and QB for the future, haven't we?
Yeah, it was. He just struck me as, I don't know, just like almost like an overexcited puppy, Jackson Dart, and he just got a bit carried away, and those interceptions were pretty poor. But yeah, there's a lot to love about Jackson Dart.
I just imagine the Giants' locker room every so often. It's a case of just like people looking at Dart and going, "Sit down, stop it,
no more.
Go and play in a minute." Our worst part of the show, but one that isn't full of as much misery as it usually is, the injury report this week. Now, currently at the time of recording, there's not a huge amount to report unless I've missed something, and the injury reports I usually go to haven't been updated properly. Amari in Hampton, absolutely gutting, though, that it looks like he could miss time as he left the field early and then left the locker room in a boot. Hopefully he has a speedy recovery because it was all there for him to kind of make his own for the rest of the season. And then there's so few to report. I wanted another player on there. So Xavier Worthy is currently questionable for Monday Night Football. I just needed a second thing to mention, Ed, if I'm honest. Lamar Jackson I'll throw in as well. There's rumors that he might be around for week 6. I don't see that happening, if I'm completely honest. It's the Rams. I see the Rams turning over the Ravens this year. There is no point rushing Lamar back with the bye week in week 7. So if you do have Lamar, maybe start to look what is available on the waiver wire just to cover you again this week if last week's option did not hit that point for you. But it's now waivers time. We've got a couple of days to waivers pass. So who are you looking at from our waiver wire this week, Ed?
Yeah, interesting time on the waiver wire. As always, got 6 options for you. First up, we've mentioned him several times already, Darren Waller, currently 68% rostered, so still available in about a third of leagues. Clear last week, wasn't a flash in the pan. Titan 4 last week, Titan 5 this week as it stands. And with Hill out for the season, he's going to be a key part of the Dolphins offense and a key target for Tua. Basically, get him rostered if available in your league, and you should probably be looking to start him. I'm only mentioning the next player, Taysom Hill. So we can revisit and explain what a fancy gremlin is, Mark. Care to do the honors?
We have to talk about Taysom Hill.
Well, I mentioned very briefly.
It was the only thing I've ever been happy about with injuries. I thought I wouldn't have to do it. So a fancy gremlin is a fancy player. It was a phrase we kind of coined last year. A player that just ruins things for you. And it can be a player, like I think we had Tyler Algier is one, because when you want the extra 6 points from BJ and Robinson, Algier gets a 1-yard rushing touchdown and does nothing for the rest of the game, rendering those points useless. Taysom Hill is a fancy gremlin because when you start him, he will get 1 point. When you don't start him, he will score 43 points. Indeed. And there's just, you never know what to do with him. And I picked him up in a couple of places this week, merely to block my opponents where I thought they might have been a tough spot at tight end, and I had space on my bench.
Okay.
I didn't spend any fab on him, though. Would you suggest anyone does this week?
Yeah, I mean that's the appeal that I'm putting out to the fantasy community. Please don't spend any fab on him. Inevitably, he will have a couple of boom weeks, but most weeks will be like yesterday: a 19-yard completion and 6 carries for -1 yard, and that isn't what you want.
No, it's not.
Brenton Strange is someone who I'd be much more in on. 57% rostered. We spoke about him before. His roster chip continues to rise, looking like a reliable tight end option, which isn't always easy to find. Yet to find the end zone, but that will come maybe tonight against the Chiefs. Solid floor and a reliable option going forward. Moving straight on.
If your league has
Mark,
open, if your league has open free agency and you're going to be in tough spot at tight end next week, then it might be worth trying to get Brenton Strange before that game kicks off as well. I do think maybe we should reach out to Brenton Strange's agent, see if he would like to sponsor the show, because I think we mention him in every format of every show at the minute.
We do know. Maybe we should have a bit of a strange
for a player that is thoroughly underwhelming all the
time. Moving on to another 3 options. Rico Dowdle, I've got to mention, 71% rostered. 47% of managers added Rico Dowdle last week as soon as Chuba Hubbard was confirmed out. They're richly rewarded. Ridiculous performance. Over 200 rushing yards, including a 43 and a 53-yard run. Touchdown as well as 3 receptions. RB1 on the week. I can't see anyone beating that tonight. Was he that good that he starts to take away from Hubbard even on his return? I mean, watch this space. But if I had shares in Hubbard, I would be starting to get nervous. Ryan Flournoy, 0% rostered. Had a great week 5 that benefited precisely 0 fantasy managers. He got his chance due to Lamb's ongoing absence, as well as Cavonte Turpin's injury. It's the first game in his career with over 41 receiving yards.
Reserving?
I don't know what they are. I mean, he did well to step up, but he's not going to be getting consistent targets when others come back. So I'd probably avoid him. Don't get carried away. And Michael Carter, 58%. It was him rather than Amari DiMercado who emerged as the lead back in Arizona as the Cardinals inexplicably threw the game away against the Titans. 18 carries for 51 yards, including a touchdown, plus 5 of 5 receptions. A very promising start, and expect him to maintain that lead role going forward. So he's someone else I'd be looking to get if available.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ed. Finally, then, to wrap up the show, let's have a brief look at Monday Night Football if you're watching this of a Monday evening. Chiefs v Jags played each other 16 times. The Chiefs are 10-6 up, having won their last 8 matches in a row. This evening will be number 9. We say that. I didn't expect the Patriots to roll over the Bills this week, but
no, that was
they kind of got the win. So hopefully the Jags will do it. Locked in. So your lineups are set. Any players in this game that are in your lineup, you're not pivoting away from. Chiefs, Mahomes feels a safe play so far this season. And the fact he's started in 94% of leagues shows that is the common consensus. Kelsey's in your lineup every week if you've got him. I just think he's become more of a safe-ish floor than a ceiling play from now. And maybe that's what we'll get for the rest of the year. Xavier Worthy did enough last week to ensure you have him starting this week. I would be worried, though, said that he's now been announced as questionable. If you've got him, you might want, once again, if you have open free agency for players involved in this game, you might want to see if there is someone else, anyone else, just to plug in if he's declared out last moment. Jags, ETN, BTJ will be starting for you this week, but hopefully you need nothing more than RB2, wide receiver 2 numbers from them. I wouldn't be confident of anything game-winning from them. You should pay off. Hollywood Brown is in this bracket this week. If you need 10 to 12 points, maybe you'll be all right with Hollywood this week. And then Brenton Strange, so we mentioned him every opportunity we get to say his name. He's always in this bracket as long as you're not hoping for much. If you need to get like 8 points to get you over the line at tight end, he will do. And best of luck, everyone else just mentioned. I'd like to say if you're still relying on Hunt and Pacheco, you have our sympathy. They're both starting 25-ish% of leagues, so I just hope you don't need much from either. That said, at some point, Kareem Hunt's going to get a 23-point game, and Pacheco will do all right as well. Just you never know when that is, so it'll be when they're on your bench, no doubt. And then Jags, I've no idea how many leagues Travis Hunter is starting because there's a glitch on Sleeper that says 100%. So it's not, surely not. I don't know why that would be the case.
Not.
If you are starting him, best of luck, unless you only need 5 points and you're trying to do that in kind of like the most show-offy sort of way by putting a low player in. I don't know. It's just not quite landed for Travis Hunter yet, has it? And I hope, really, really hope it does. I've got a feeling he's going to be, especially playing both sides, he's going to be a more valuable player real life than he ever will be for fantasy or IDP leagues. I say he's probably going to be a gem from here on out, isn't he?
Yeah, he'll have a couple of fantasy relevant weeks, but at the moment, it doesn't look like there's going to be any consistency there.
IDP scoring is not something that we kind of pay much attention to. So if he is doing bits in IDP, please do let us go in the comment. No, in the comments, it will save me Googling it. That is us, though, Ed. Week 5 is just about in the books, apart from Monday Night Football. Week 6 is around the corner. We are ploughing through the season, aren't we?
No, sad times. Let's enjoy it while it's here.
We'll be back then in a couple of days for our Week 6 preview show, including a very special Sunday Night Bet Club looking ahead to the London game, of which we will be going to watch the Broncos versus the Jets. But until then, I've got nothing more to say, Ed, unless you do.
No, nothing from me.
Well then, Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to the team from TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Twitter and Instagram.